You are a king. You are surrounded by luxury. Your subjects bow their heads, and every command you give is law. But here's the real truth: all your power collapses before fever, chills, and pain, when a medieval illness eats away at your body like rust on ancient armor. Courtiers whisper behind doors. Physicians guess the cause from the color of your urine. Priests pray to every known and unknown saint. And meanwhile, you are no longer a monarch, but just another doomed soul at the edge of the plague. But before you get comfortable, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments which city you're watching from and what time it is for you. I'm always curious to see who's joined us. Now make yourself comfortable. Let's begin. You wake up in a bed that is almost as uncomfortable as the times you inhabit. Spain. The year is somewhere around 1312, but you have long since lost track of the calendar. The stone walls of your chamber sweat with a persistent dampness that even the most expensive tapestries cannot disguise. Outside, the air is thick with the unmistakable aroma of horse dung and human sweat, punctuated by the ever present tang of burning wood. At least you are not one of those peasants who sleep on straw and wake up with rats nibbling at their toes. No, you are Ferdinand IV, King of Castile and Leon, although in the chill of this morning you do not feel much like a king. You feel more like a sack of half-cooked meat, feverish and fragile, your skin sticky, and your mind dull with exhaustion. The castle is quiet, save for the faint clatter of distant servants. You try to sit up, but a dull ache reminds you that you are not quite yourself these days. Every part of you seems determined to rebel. Your knees protest, your back throbs, your stomach makes noises as if it is considering open mutiny. You wonder briefly if kingship is worth the agony, but the thought takes too much effort, so you let it slip away. There will be plenty of time for existential questions later. Right now, you must focus on the act of breathing, which in your current state is neither simple nor entirely satisfying. Once, you imagined being king would mean feasts, tournaments, the gleam of polished armor, and the trembling awe of subjects. Instead, most days are a procession of endless meetings and endless aches. You, king, are rarely left alone. Your body is public property, your health a matter for court gossip, and your personal agony an open secret. Every cough is a political crisis, every sneeze a portent of doom. Even the rats in the walls seem to know that your health is the talk of Castile. You stare at the ceiling, tracing the cracks in the plaster. You know those cracks better than your own family. The cracks are honest. They are what they are, growing slowly, undisturbed by ambition or fear. You, on the other hand, must perform. Your mind flickers to the men and women outside your chamber, courtiers, priests, doctors, advisors, sycophants, all of them waiting, watching, speculating about how much longer you have left to reign or to breathe. For them, your illness is a problem to solve or an opportunity to seize. For you, it is simply the reality that has defined the last months of your life. Sometimes you hear the city itself beyond the walls, the squabbling of merchants, the distant bell of a church, the laughter of children who, you assume, have not yet learned to fear illness. But the world beyond your window feels impossibly far away. Here, in this small chamber, you are alone with your breath and your pain. Occasionally, you wonder if you are being punished for what you do not know, for being king, perhaps, or for wanting something different than what you have been given. You are not dying today, not yet, but you are unwell in the way that only a king can be, slowly, publicly, and surrounded by people who insist on pretending everything will be fine if only you drink one more cup of strange smelling tea or submit to yet another round of bloodletting. The physicians argue over your bedside, their voices muffled but urgent. They disagree about whether you are hot or cold, wet or dry, melancholic or phlegmatic. You are none of those things. You are simply tired. If you close your eyes, you can almost imagine you are back in the days before you wore a crown, running through the corridors as a child, unaware that your body would someday betray you. But the thought is too bittersweet, so you force your eyes open. You will not indulge in nostalgia. Nostalgia is for people who believe in better times ahead, and you are not certain you do. Someone knocks at your door, 3 short raps, polite but insistent. It will be your steward, coming to remind you that you are expected to live through another day of royal duties. You are expected to endure, to preside, to rule, but your body feels less and less like an instrument of rule and more like a cage. The knock comes again, and you sigh. You pull yourself upright, every bone in your body groaning in protest. Outside, the world waits, but inside, you are simply a sick man in a cold bed, trying not to die before lunch. Thus begins another day in your not so glorious reign, a day like any other, heavy with the stench of illness and the weight of expectation. In the grand story of history, you are a king. In the small story of your body, you are little more than a collection of aches and fevers, wrapped in a blanket and waiting for the end. You did not choose your companions, at least not the ones who matter most. If you had your way, perhaps you would surround yourself with poets and musicians, clever jesters, loyal knights. Instead, since childhood, your most faithful attendants have been ailments, fevers, chills, aches, and strange rashes whose names even the wisest doctors cannot pronounce. These companions do not flatter, do not seek your gold, do not care about your royal dignity. They arrive uninvited and settle in, as relentless as winter, as indifferent as time. Your earliest memories are painted with sickness. As a boy, you remember lying in a drafty chamber while the wind rattled the shutters and your mother's face loomed above you, lined with worry. You remember the taste of bitter herbal brews and the sting of hot cloths pressed to your forehead. When your playmates ran wild in the courtyard, you counted the beams in the ceiling, waiting for the fever to break. Childhood for a prince is always precarious, but you quickly learned that the line between living and dying is as thin as the membrane on an overcooked egg. Now, as king, you have not outgrown these sick room rituals. If anything, they have become more elaborate. Where once your mother sat, now three physicians hover, each with his own theory and his own bag of mysterious powders. One insists that your liver is too hot. Another claims your spleen is dangerously cold. The third simply shrugs and mutters prayers under his breath. Their concern is genuine, or at least convincing, but you sense that they care less about your suffering than about the opportunity to be the one who saved the king. The court will remember a cure, not a comfort. In your darker moments, you wonder if the crown itself is a kind of disease, a slow fever that settles in your bones and never leaves. The throne is hard, and the air around it colder than any corridor. There are days when you suspect that the weight of rule is what makes your body betray you. You have read the chronicles. How many kings died too young? How many queens faded away in their beds? How many heirs perished before their time? Perhaps the real inheritance of royalty is not gold or land or even glory. Perhaps it is this endless struggle against your own mortality, played out in public while the world watches and waits. It is a peculiar kind of loneliness, being sick and royal. Your bed is rarely empty. Advisors, physicians, priests parade through your chamber with the persistence of tax collectors. Yet none of them can truly share your pain. The fever that soaks your sheets belongs to you alone. The aches in your limbs, the cough that racks your chest, the confusion that clouds your mind in the dark hours. These are not diplomatic matters, not policy issues, not problems that can be solved by negotiation or decree. They are reminders that king or beggar, flesh is weak. The rituals of illness are their own kind of court ceremony. Every morning, a servant brings you a cup of water, which you stare at suspiciously, remembering tales of poison and betrayal. The chief physician examines your tongue and declares you imbalanced. He prescribes a series of treatments involving leeches, infusions, and the occasional application of mustard seed poultice. The most optimistic of your advisors suggests you simply need more sleep. You have not slept well since you learned how easily sleep can shade into something more permanent. Between treatments, you listen to the gossip of your courtiers. They whisper in corners about your delicate constitution, each with a theory as to which childhood illness marked you for this life of frailty. Some say you were cursed by an enemy, others that you inherited your father's weak blood. A few recall the time you fell from a horse as a child, as if a broken arm could explain years of fatigue and fever. The truth, you suspect, is less interesting. Bodies break. Some break faster than others. There is nothing poetic about it, but poetry rarely survives the realities of flesh and bone. You do not blame the physicians, not really. Medicine in these days is half ritual, half guesswork, and they do their best. Sometimes their cures make things worse. A purgative that leaves you weaker, a bleeding that brings only dizziness and despair. Sometimes you wonder if their presence is simply meant to reassure the court that something is being done even if nothing can truly be done at all. You lie in bed, watching dust dance in a shaft of light, and imagine yourself as a specimen, an object lesson in royal vulnerability. You have learned to endure. Kings do not complain. Complaints are for peasants and children. You accept your aches as you accept your title with weary resignation. After all, you are not alone. Throughout history, kings and queens have died of coughs, chills, fevers, and all the ordinary miseries that plague the lowliest subjects. You are part of a grand tradition, one that offers little comfort, but much company. It is an odd kind of comfort to know that you will not be remembered for how you lived, but perhaps for how you died. The details of your suffering will be recorded by clerks, analyzed by doctors, speculated upon by generations yet unborn. They will wonder, centuries from now, whether your cough was really the plague, or your fever a sign of some darker curse. You almost wish you could leave them a note. It was nothing special, just the ordinary decay of flesh. Yours truly, Ferdinand. As the day drags on, your aches intensify. Your body is a kingdom in revolt, every joint and muscle reminding you of the limits of power. You close your eyes and let the pain wash over you, your only true companion, familiar, persistent, and utterly unimpressed by crowns. Your life, already a daily parade of aches and uncertainties, would be almost peaceful if not for your court's endless and growing obsession with your body. Illness in a king is never private, never simple. Every cough, every pallor, every groan at dawn echoes through the stone halls and emerges exaggerated in the trembling whispers of those who serve you. It is not enough that you suffer. Your court must suffer with you, or at least act as if they do. Physicians, you discover, inspire as much dread as they do hope. When you first felt the chill in your bones, the faint flutter in your chest, it was not the pain itself that frightened you. No, it was the memory of previous visits from the king's doctors. These men arrive with pomp and purpose, their faces grave, and their hands heavy with pouches of dried herbs and instruments that look suspiciously like weapons. They argue at your bedside about the proper way to purge a fever, whether the stars favor leeches this week, and which bodily humor is most likely at fault for your latest decline. One claims that you must be bled often and from the neck, because the seat of royal dignity is the royal blood. Another prefers boiling broths laced with imported spices and the bark of some tree that only grows in a distant, expensive land. The third offers something different each morning, adjusting his cure to the mood of the court. If he hears that the queen favors onions, you will taste onions. If the bishop hints that relics are in fashion, expect a bone fragment to be tied to your wrist before lunch. The servants avoid these physicians, and who could blame them? The rumors of what happens in the king's sick room spread like wildfire. They have seen nobles emerge from the physician's care, pale and trembling, or not at all. The king's doctor is often a foreigner, a Jew or a Moor, sometimes both, which ensures suspicion and fear from all quarters. The court prefers its familiar superstitions to the mysterious rituals of learned men. Every new face in the infirmary is met with sidelong glances and quiet prayers that his cures are less deadly than the disease itself. Meanwhile, the healers from the countryside, herb women, charmers, old wives with recipes handed down through generations, are kept at a distance, summoned only when all else fails. Their concoctions smell of earth and desperation. The court likes to pretend they are above such folk magic, but in the dark of night, you hear whispers about the moon's phases and secret ointments. Sometimes you catch your steward clutching a charm under his robes, muttering prayers to saints not found in any proper missal. The court is afraid of what it cannot control, and there is nothing less controllable than disease. Your own feelings about these practitioners fluctuate with your temperature. On bad days, you almost welcome their presence. Their hands are cool, their voices low, and if nothing else, they bring distraction from the endless droning of court politics. On good days, you dread their approach, knowing they will force some new indignity upon your failing body. They measure, prod, poke, and prod again, always hopeful that this time their science or their guesswork will discover the cause of your decay. The truth is, your body is a battleground. The doctors fight with words and treatments, the courtiers with suspicion and gossip. No one trusts the others. You watch them from your bed, the physicians glancing nervously at the chamberlain, the priests hovering in case a soul needs saving, the guards watching for poisoners. Each group is convinced that only they can save the king and that all others are plotting his ruin. You have learned the rituals, the morning inspection of your tongue, the afternoon application of leeches, the evening dose of something so bitter you can taste it in your dreams. You nod when they tell you to rest, though you know rest will not come. You let them recite their theories: hot bile, cold wind, humor imbalance, and wonder if any of them truly believes what he says. Perhaps their certainty is a form of self protection. If the king dies, it must be someone else's fault. Once, late at night, you hear two of your physicians arguing in the corridor. Their voices are sharp, words cutting through the thick silence. One accuses the other of ignorance, of dangerous incompetence. The other retorts that the king is doomed anyway, and only a miracle or a burial will end the suffering. You almost laugh, but the pain in your chest prevents it. It is a comfort, in a way, to know that even the experts cannot agree on how best to save you. Or perhaps that is the real tragedy. The fear of the physician, you realize, is a fear of the unknown. Illness makes fools of wise men and kings of beggars. Every day, you endure new treatments, new theories, new superstitions dressed up as science. You are poked and bled and made to swallow concoctions whose main effect is to remind you how far medicine still has to go. The only certainty is that in the end, your body will decide for itself. And so you lie in your bed, surrounded by anxious courtiers and bickering physicians, acutely aware that your fate is both public spectacle and private misery. In the morning, there will be more rituals, more arguments, more fear. For now, you close your eyes and let the sounds of their bickering lull you to a fitful, uneasy sleep. The court, for all its power and knowledge, can do nothing but wait and hope and whisper in the dark. You have long suspected that sickness is not only a private affair, but the most public weapon in your kingdom's silent war for power. In your castle, every cough is currency, and every fever rumor is the signal for another round of whispered alliances and backroom deals. The scent of your sweat barely dries before it is analyzed in the corridors. Your sleepless nights are measured and reported with the precision of a priest calculating tithes. A king's health is not his own. It is gossip, opportunity, and occasionally the cause of a national crisis. If you had the strength to laugh, you might find the whole thing amusing. Instead, you simply endure it, wrapped in blankets that do nothing to soften the cold, listening as courtiers maneuver just out of sight. They claim to be concerned for your well being, but their eyes always drift to your hands. Are they trembling? To your lips? Are they blue? Some nights, as your head spins with fever, you imagine a shadowy book being updated with every detail of your decline. His Majesty coughed 3 times before dawn. He refused a second helping of broth. He requested an extra candle, sign of approaching death. The court is full of people who want you to die, and people who need you to live, and, most numerous of all, people who have not decided yet. A single rumor about your health can shift alliances faster than a change in the wind. Your cousin appears at your bedside with the air of a vulture scouting for a suitable branch. The chancellor weeps in public, but counts coins in private, calculating how much loyalty costs if your reign ends before he is ready. Your mother's prayers are so loud the chapel windows rattle, but even she glances at you sometimes with a peculiar mix of hope and dread. Nothing in the palace is safe from suspicion. Your food is tasted by a different servant every day, and if any of them so much as sneezes, the kitchens erupt in panic. Letters from distant relatives arrive twice as often, each cloaked in the language of concern, but filled with hidden questions about the state of the realm. Old enemies send gifts, fine tapestries, rare spices, suspiciously robust wines, which are carefully examined and then left to gather dust in your storeroom. You have learned not to trust even the prayers offered on your behalf. Everyone knows that sometimes the most fervent prayers are the ones that ask God to make your illness quick and convenient. Superstition is as thick as the candle smoke in your chamber. In the corridors, servants carry salt in their pockets, and nobody dares sweep after sunset for fear of disturbing the spirits. At night, you hear the scurrying feet of the chambermaids, laying sprigs of rosemary and garlic at the thresholds just in case. Your pillow is turned 3 times before sleep, following a ritual so old that even the oldest nurse cannot remember why. It must be done. If a black dog is seen in the courtyard, The entire staff spends the day whispering prayers and spitting over their shoulders. For the physicians, these superstitions are a nuisance, yet they themselves are not immune. One insists that your chamber be kept facing east for healing. Another refuses to touch your wrist on days when the moon is full. A third carries a tiny bone amulet hidden under his robe, though he claims to believe only in the science of Aristotle. When your condition worsens, the physicians argue even more loudly, their medical advice flavored with hints of the occult. Perhaps, one suggests, your illness is the work of a jealous rival or a curse gone unnoticed. It is remarkable how quickly fear infects the highest ranks of power. Your advisors, supposedly men of reason, glance nervously at shadows and argue about whether the court should hire another exorcist. There are hushed stories about a shadowy figure glimpsed in the chapel, or a strange pattern in the frost on your window, or the flight of an owl over the battlements at dawn. Each detail is recorded, analyzed, woven into a tapestry of dread. The palace is, in a sense, its own organism, sick, feverish, and desperate to find meaning in every cough and chill. Your body becomes a battleground, not only for disease, but for interpretation. Each symptom is twisted to fit a theory. Each rumor becomes evidence in a case that will never be solved. Sometimes you feel like a corpse at your own funeral, forced to watch as the mourners argue about what killed you. Your only real comfort, if such a word can be used, is the knowledge that everyone, from the lowest kitchen boy to the most ancient bishop, is equally afraid. No one knows when or if you will recover. No one can be certain that they will not catch whatever it is that plagues you. The entire castle is suspended in a cloud of anxiety. Each day, a new chapter in a story that will not end until you do. You close your eyes and listen to the whispers behind your door, the creak of footsteps on the stairs, the faint sound of a priest muttering Latin in the shadows. The palace is alive with fear and hope, with greed and superstition, and at the center of it all, you, too weak to rule, too sick to die, caught in the middle of a very royal kind of misery. Here, in these long, anxious hours, you are not just a king, you are a symbol, a warning, and, most of all, a patient in a very crowded, very haunted sick room. The great irony of kingship, you reflect as you lie motionless in your too large bed, is how little power you actually wield over your own body. In the stories, a king is a creature of decision, one who commands armies, shifts laws with a signature, doles out land and mercy, and watches the world tremble at his word. In reality, you are a man unable to command his own bowels, besieged not by enemies at the gate, but by the slow, stubborn rebellion of organs and limbs. There are moments, more frequent now, when the very act of rising from your sheets feels like a campaign requiring as much strategy and luck as any battle in the fields. You are surrounded by the trappings of power, the heavy crown that leaves a dent on your forehead, the scepter you last held with trembling hands, the endless stacks of parchment awaiting your signature. On days when your fever retreats enough to let you think, you attempt to preside over affairs of state, only to find that your vision swims, and your courtiers exchange worried glances with every hesitant pause in your speech. Your word is still law, but the laws of your own body have become more absolute, and they are enforced with no mercy. The greatest authority in Castile and Leon is now subject to the will of a mysterious fever and a cough that robs you of breath. You do your best to project strength because weakness is dangerous currency in the palace. You recall the advice drilled into you as a child: show no pain, let no man see you falter. It is easy to repeat, difficult to enact. Your body betrays you in 100 small, humiliating ways. A sudden shiver in front of an ambassador, the need to pause for air after 3 steps across the audience hall, the private struggle to keep down a spoonful of broth while your mother and your son watch with brittle hope. Each day is a series of negotiations, not with rebellious nobles or ambitious generals, but with your own flesh. It would be less galling if your subjects could see you as you are now. You, who once rode at the head of armies and endured weeks in the saddle, reduced to a shivering figure beneath layers of furs, issuing royal edicts from a pile of cushions. But the castle is full of eyes, and rumors are quicker than pigeons. You know that stories of your debility will reach the city long before the truth. The people will say the king is bewitched or poisoned or simply too weak for the throne. They will measure the fate of the realm by the color of your cheeks and the steadiness of your hands. Your helplessness is both private torture and public danger. You must rule, and yet you are ruled. The court expects your judgment, but your mind is clouded by fever dreams and a fatigue that no sleep can mend. You cling to the routine of governance, listening to reports, signing decrees, granting pardons, long after you have lost the energy or clarity to understand what you are approving. Sometimes you imagine yourself as a puppet, mouth moving without meaning, as your counselors maneuver your signature toward their own ends. Yet, even in your weakness, the demands of power are relentless. Advisors crowd your bedside, bringing urgent questions about taxes, treaties, and trouble at the borders. They speak as if the fate of kingdoms depends on your answer to whether grain tariffs should be raised, when you are mostly thinking about how best to avoid vomiting onto your own royal seal. They whisper about war, but your war is fought inch by inch across the battlefield of a cold marble floor, from the threshold of your bedroom to the icy privy. Sometimes the helplessness is almost comical. You, Ferdinand IV, King of Castile and Leon, must ask for help to stand, to wash, to move from one chair to another. The same hands that once wielded a sword with the weight of history now struggle to lift a goblet without spilling. Your dignity, carefully constructed over decades, unravels thread by thread with every wheeze and wince. No one dares to comment, but you see the pity in their faces, the anxiety in their hurried bows. Perhaps most maddening of all is how invisible this helplessness makes you to yourself. The rituals of kingship continue: audiences, proclamations, ceremonies, while you float through them, ghost like, half present, anchored to your own misery. You smile and nod, play the part of the sovereign, while your mind retreats behind the fever's veil. You wonder if this is how all kings die, not with a dramatic gasp on the battlefield, but quietly, by slow degrees, vanishing behind layers of ceremony and pain. The truth, you suspect, is that power was always an illusion. The crown never kept death at bay. Your armies could not protect you from the slow rot of disease, and your gold could not buy health or peace. Now, lying here in the half light, you realize that the greatest drama of your reign is not in the council chamber or on the field of war, but here in this sick room where the only enemy is yourself. As the day fades and the pain sharpens, you muster your dignity, even as your body conspires to betray you again. There is no victory to be had, only endurance, only the silent hope that tomorrow will bring a little less helplessness, or at least a little more time to pretend. In the great ledger of kings, perhaps that is all anyone can hope for: to endure, to rule for as long as the body allows, and to leave behind a story less about how you fell and more about how you kept standing, however briefly, against the darkness closing in. By now, your body is less a vessel of royal blood than a battleground for medicinal experiments, a living archive of everything bitter and questionable that medieval science can concoct. You have become accustomed, if such a thing is possible, to the taste of hope served in chipped goblets, delivered by men in grave robes, and justified by little more than tradition, guesswork, and a confidence that would be impressive if it ever led to a cure. Your meals are less about nourishment and more about chemical warfare. The kitchen and the infirmary wage battle over your stomach, each convinced that the right combination of herbs, roots, and animal parts will tip the scales away from death, or at least delay it for a few more dawns. Every morning begins the same way. The air, still and cold, is sliced by the arrival of the chief physician, who carries a tray that looks more like a collection of relics than a prescription. Here is a cup of some steaming brown liquid, its surface greasy, its scent reminiscent of spoiled onions and yesterday's fire. Here, a thick paste of pounded garlic and honey, meant to be swallowed whole, though it fights you all the way down. If you are unlucky, and you are often unlucky, there will be a vial of something sharp and clear, meant to purge the humors. This always means a day spent in unpleasant proximity to the chamber pot. They give you decoctions made from mouse droppings and bloodwort, from stale bread and dried frogs. One cup is so sour it makes your eyes water for hours. Another so bland you wonder if it is simply water colored by the rust at the bottom of the kettle. Sometimes, in a rare moment of candor, a physician will admit that the taste is not the point. The bitterness, Your Majesty, is proof that it is working. This is small comfort when the only clear effect is to make you fear the next dose. You are not ignorant of the desperation behind these treatments. The court clings to the hope that the right potion will transform you from a shivering invalid into a monarch worthy of your crown. You wish you could share in this optimism. Instead, you mark time by your intake of powders and syrups, counting the hours between doses, the number of sips it takes to empty a cup, the color of your tongue after each application of a paste that stains your lips blue for days. The list of ingredients is as long as your patience is short. They try infusions of willow bark and foxglove, mustard seed and dried nettles, cow's milk boiled with slivers of bone. The court alchemist, a man with more ambition than restraint, once suggested a salve of quicksilver and goose fat, but even your most credulous physician hesitated to apply it. Someone brings you a sachet of lavender tied in an old linen rag, with instructions to keep it under your pillow for luck. A village wise woman, smuggled in during one particularly grim week, leaves behind a cake of beeswax and a vague promise that your dreams will improve. The only constant is the parade of faces, each healer convinced that his and only his solution will turn the tide. They argue in hushed voices by your bedside, debating the merits of one herb over another, occasionally turning on you as if you are to blame for not responding quickly enough to their treatments. His Majesty's humor must be particularly stubborn, one mutters, while another insists that the king's soul is fighting a spiritual battle that only the right combination of relics and roots can resolve. You have learned not to resist. Resistance only inspires greater creativity. If you refuse the broth, they return with a thicker, saltier variant. If you protest the leeches, they bring more, explaining that your reluctance proves how badly your body needs them. Once, you asked to see the list of remedies you had already endured, and the resulting scroll was so long it trailed across the floor, a tapestry of well-intentioned torture. Your hope is not in any of these potions. It is in the possibility that one of them might bring a moment of relief, a clear hour, a brief nap without sweating, a morning when you can eat without retching. The bar for success has dropped steadily with each failed remedy. You no longer dream of a miraculous recovery, only of less pain, less taste of rot, fewer nights spent watching the moon and listening to your own ragged breathing. Sometimes, when the chamber is empty and the medicine still churns in your gut, you wonder if your physicians are right in their own way. Perhaps the act of treatment itself is a kind of comfort, a ritual that reassures not just you, but everyone who fears what your absence would mean. The kingdom can survive a sick king as long as there is hope he will get better. But a dead king, well, that is a much larger dose of uncertainty. For now, you swallow what you are given, close your eyes, and let the bitter concoctions do their mysterious work. Each potion is a wager against the darkness, each syrup a whispered promise that the sun will rise again. You wish you could believe it, but for now, belief is another medicine you cannot keep down. The art of diagnosis in your time is a game of guesses, a parade of confident pronouncements delivered without the faintest benefit of actual knowledge. If you listen to your physicians, and what choice do you have? You might believe that your body is an elaborate puzzle to be solved by staring at your tongue, sniffing your urine, and feeling the pulse at your wrist with all the solemnity of a priest preparing to read an omen in sheep entrails. There are no microscopes, no laboratories, no charts of symptoms and causes, just men with beards and robes quarreling over whether you are more cold and dry or hot and moist, as if your fever could be measured by medieval poetry rather than mortal pain. Your mornings begin with the great inspection. You are instructed to stick out your tongue, which is examined with frowns and a hint of theatrical dread. A yellowish tinge, one physician says, as if he is consulting a recipe, a sure sign of choleric imbalance. Another, leaning in so close you can feel his breath, counters, but the dryness speaks of melancholy. Your pulse is then prodded and squeezed, the rhythm declared fast but weak, slow but thready, or, on particularly creative days, wavering, like the spirit of a discouraged peasant. You would laugh if your chest were not so tight. Your urine, collected in a chamber pot that has seen better years, becomes the star of its own daily drama. Physicians hold it up to the light, swirling it in glass vials, peering at the color, sniffing for hints of disease. If it is pale, you are too cold. If dark, too hot. If it smells, they argue about what you must have eaten last night. Sometimes you suspect they are merely passing the time, searching for meaning in shadows and smells, hoping that the right phrase will sound convincing enough to keep their position secure another week. No matter the diagnosis, the prescription is always the same. Do something, try something, trust in the power of their learning, or, at the very least, in the endurance of your constitution. You are told to avoid certain foods, then encouraged to eat them for balance. You are bled on alternate days until your arms resemble the patchwork of a well used tunic. When all else fails, they suggest prayer, fasting, and a brisk walk in the garden. You are too weak to walk, but the suggestion is made with such seriousness that you almost feel guilty for not trying. There is, you realize, a peculiar theater to it all. The physicians argue in Latin, murmur in Greek, and occasionally invoke the wisdom of Arab scholars, whose names they mangle. They wave their hands in the air, scribble diagrams of the body on scraps of parchment, and draw little circles to represent the four humors. No one has ever seen a humor, but everyone is certain that yours are out of balance. In moments of clarity, you wonder if you are truly ill or simply caught in the machinery of their competing egos. You overhear them sometimes in the corridor. It is clearly a case of the vapors, says one, with the authority of a man who has seen a great many vapors. No, it is a wasting sickness, the kind that took King Sancho, another insists. He is bewitched, a third whispers, convinced that the answer is not in your body, but in the malice of your enemies. By the time these debates reach your bedside, the story has grown stranger. You are at once too dry and too moist, too cold and too hot, bewitched and blessed, a walking contradiction of symptoms. In truth, you are simply exhausted. Each new diagnosis brings a new regimen, a different tea, a fresh collection of leeches, another round of prayers. You no longer bother to ask questions. The answers are as vague as your memory of feeling well. Once, in a fit of irritation, you demanded to know what would happen if you simply did nothing. The physicians looked at each other, then at you, then at the ceiling. He would surely die, one declared. But then you think, you seem to be dying anyway, just more slowly and with greater expense. Every so often, a visiting scholar or foreign doctor arrives, trailing a cloud of reputation and the hope of miracle cures. They examine you, mutter their opinions, and depart as quickly as they came, leaving behind new recipes for poultices and fresh arguments for the resident healers. None of them ever agree on what ails you. Sometimes you suspect they are diagnosing your position, not your body. A king must have a grand illness, something worthy of a chronicle, not the ordinary rot that claims peasants in the fields. Despite their confidence, you feel your world shrinking. The symptoms, the fever, the sweats, the pain, are yours alone. The diagnoses swirl around you like gnats, landing and departing, never quite settling into anything solid. You grow tired of the taste of medicine, the sting of needles, the endless parade of hopeful faces and hopeless cures. Your body is no longer yours. It belongs to the experts, to the curious, to history. And so, each morning, you submit to their rituals, you show your tongue, offer your wrist, sip the foul potions, you let them argue, hoping that one day their certainty will become knowledge. Until then, you are the mystery at the center of the kingdom, a living riddle without an answer, only more questions, more prayers, and the quiet certainty that the answer, when it finally comes, will be as ordinary and final as death itself. If there is any force in your kingdom more persistent than disease, it is prayer. The moment your health began to waver, the machinery of faith swung into motion as if by some great, invisible hand. Now, prayer surrounds you as thickly as the tapestries on your chamber walls, stifling, relentless, and at times almost as exhausting as your illness. Priests, monks, and nuns become as familiar as your own shadow, always hovering, always hopeful, always suggesting that perhaps you are one Ave Maria away from recovery. You are not an irreligious man. No king can afford to be. But you have learned over these long, heavy days that there are many kinds of prayers. There are prayers for mercy, whispered by your mother, whose voice cracks and trembles as she kneels at your bedside. There are prayers for strength, uttered by your advisors, who do not care for your soul so much as for the stability of the realm. There are prayers for your speedy departure, muttered quietly by those who would rather see the next king ascend with fewer complications. The chapel, once a place of rare ceremony, now feels like an annex to your sick room. The air smells of incense and old wax, mingled with the sharper tang of fear. Monks file through in silent processions, reciting psalms in Latin that even they barely understand. At all hours, you hear the echo of chanting from some dark corner, like the persistent buzzing of a distant, hopeful insect. At night, when fever grips you and the world seems to tip and blur, you almost believe the prayers might work, if only by sheer weight and repetition. The kingdom's supply of relics, you discover, is endless. Pieces of bone, scraps of linen, ancient splinters, said to be from the true cross, all are paraded past your bed and pressed into your hands. Each relic comes with a story, a little miracle whispered as encouragement. This saint healed the blind, that one calmed storms, another raised the dead. Your advisors listen attentively, as if collecting remedies for a particularly stubborn cold. You have lost track of how many times your brow has been anointed, your limbs sprinkled with holy water, your sickbed circled by priests swinging censers as if they might drive out whatever ails you through sheer olfactory power. The queen is especially devout, her belief a solid thing, unshakable, armored in ritual and conviction. She brings you rosaries, presses medals into your palm, arranges for processions in your honor. For her, the failure of each prayer is simply a sign that more prayer is required. If you die, it will not be for lack of spiritual effort. You suspect the monks are running out of candles. The palace surely has not seen such religious fervor since the last outbreak of plague. Your physicians, for all their learning, are not above invoking the saints themselves. Pray for the intercession of Saint Roch, one whispers, pressing a palm to your forehead. He is particularly effective against fevers. The alchemist prefers Saint Luke, patron of doctors, while the bishop campaigns for the intervention of the Virgin Mary herself. The competition for your soul is as intense as the battle for your body, and you are the unhappy prize. At times, the palace itself seems transformed into a shrine. Courtiers kneel in corners, muttering, counting beads. The kitchens prepare special loaves for saintly feasts, though you are rarely well enough to eat. The gardens are dotted with small gatherings, hands joined, lips moving in silent urgency. News of your condition travels through the city, and soon the churches are packed with petitioners, some praying for your recovery, others, perhaps more honestly, for peace and a swift resolution to the uncertainty. And yet, for all this devotion, you find your own prayers increasingly hollow. You mouth the words, follow the motions, but doubt seeps in around the edges like damp in a stone wall. In the feverish nights, you wonder if your illness is punishment or merely chance. The priests say suffering brings you closer to God. You wonder if God, surrounded by such a chorus of conflicting requests, can even hear your particular plea. Sometimes you long for silence, just a moment without the drone of ritual, the endless list of saints, the pressure to be not just a king, but an example, a demonstration that faith and order are stronger than the chaos in your veins. You would trade 100 prayers for 1 hour of sleep, 1,000 relics for a single breath without pain. But kings do not get to choose their comforts, and so you endure, wrapped in incense and hymns and the gentle suffocation of too much hope. You are not sure if the prayers are for you or for the world beyond your chamber, a world desperate to believe that order can be restored by enough candles and whispered words. The rituals go on, a comfort to those who need it. You close your eyes, murmur your own quiet prayer, not for healing, but for a little peace, and wait to see if the morning will bring any change at all. If the days of a king are supposed to be marked by variety, new decrees, new faces, new intrigues, your days have become an endless repetition, a slow motion echo in a castle that never quite wakes up. Each morning is a reluctant surrender to consciousness, as if your body itself is bargaining for a few more moments of sleep before the dull, familiar weight of pain returns. You open your eyes not because you are rested, but because some servant, braver than the others, has been told to check that you are still breathing. The room is always the same, stone walls heavy with damp, a draft curling under the door, the thin gray light of a sun that never seems to rise for you. The furniture has lost all distinction. Your world has shrunk to the lumpy mattress, the creaking chair beside your bed, the chamber pot that looms with more dread than any royal responsibility. The tapestry on the wall is the only thing that changes, sometimes shifting its folds in the stale air, sometimes catching a stray shaft of light, sometimes serving as a silent witness to your private, unending monotony. The first pain is always in your head, a dull, insistent throb that announces itself before you are even fully awake. Next comes the stiffness in your neck, the heaviness in your chest, the leaden ache in your limbs. Some mornings you convince yourself that perhaps today it will be better, that the new draft of ground root or last night's procession of relics will have shifted the balance. Within minutes, you know better. Each pain is exactly where you left it, patient, expectant, and perfectly unbothered by your hopes. The rituals begin. Your chamberlain enters, voice pitched low with a reverence that is half genuine, half exhausted. He asks how you are feeling, as if the answer might surprise him. The physicians follow, faces a study in calculated optimism. They prod, poke, and peer. You offer your wrist, your tongue, your urine, already knowing the verdict will be ambiguous. You are better in some ways, worse in others, but always, inevitably, unchanged in the only way that matters. The nurse arrives with the first of many medicines, her hands shaking only slightly. You accept the cup, swallow the bitterness, feel it settle like a stone in your gut. Another hour, another hope. In the distance, you hear the castle's life moving on without you, the clang of kitchen pots, the low hum of gossip, the bark of a dog in the courtyard. Once, these sounds would have reminded you of your power, your place at the center of things. Now, they remind you of all that continues in spite of you. Midday is much the same as morning, just with a stronger sun, though you barely see it, hidden behind the drawn curtains. The pain shifts, never lessening, only migrating. Sometimes it is your side, sometimes your back, sometimes a general weariness that wraps your entire body in a thick, invisible shroud. Meals are offered, then removed untouched. Hunger is a memory, an inconvenience, nothing more. Afternoons are for visitors, relatives who arrive smelling of hope and disappointment, courtiers who speak too loudly or not at all, priests who offer more prayers than comfort. Each face wears the same expression, a studied sorrow, as if performing for an audience. You are expected to show gratitude, to muster the energy for polite conversation, to listen to well meaning advice about faith, diet, and rest. You say what is required, nodding at intervals, saving your real energy for the simple private act of enduring. By evening, the pain is not worse, just older. You measure the hours by the fading light, the soft steps of servants cleaning, the shuffle of slippers on cold stone. The medicines grow stronger, but so does the pain. You drift in and out of sleep, never truly resting, always aware of the dull roar of discomfort that has become your only true companion. The faces change, the prayers change, the herbs and potions change, but the pain is as loyal as any subject. Sometimes, in the small hours of the night, you wonder how long a person can persist in such a state. If pain is a lesson, you are an expert scholar. If suffering brings wisdom, then you are the wisest king in Christendom. Yet none of it brings you closer to relief, only to a kind of resignation. You do not wish for death, not precisely, but you no longer fear it. The day's only real surprise is that it ends much as it began, with you, alone, a king in name, waiting for another morning that will be exactly like this one. Sleep, when it comes, is shallow and unsatisfying. Dreams, if they come at all, are pale shadows of your waking misery, repetitions of endless corridors, faces blurred by disappointment, ceremonies that never quite end. You wake, and the pattern begins again. The same stone, the same pain, the same ritual. You wonder if this is what kingship always was. A long, slow drowning in repetition until even your suffering ceases to be remarkable. In the dark, you count your breaths. Outside, the world turns on. Inside, you persist. Tomorrow will come, and it will be just like today, your private Groundhog Day, a slow waltz with pain and the hope, faint as dawn, that something might someday break the cycle. Even sickness cannot exempt you from the weight of legacy, nor can it shield you from the never ending obligations of counsel. You may be king in name only now, your body feeble, your eyes sunken, your will sapped by an exhaustion that feels ancient, but the realm persists. The business of Castile and Leon does not halt for a mere mortal's failing health, and in every day your council gathers in your shadow, eager for decisions you no longer have the strength or clarity to make. Your counselors enter in cautious procession, each one eyeing the others with suspicion and calculation. Their faces are practiced masks, equal parts concern for their king and concern for themselves. The chancellor bows deeply, his voice honeyed with false sympathy, as he assures you that the kingdom is secure, the treasury holding steady. The marshal, grim and taciturn, speaks of unrest along the border. The archbishop invokes the will of God, carefully avoiding any mention of the will of men. Each presents his concerns, wrapped in layers of deference and rivalry, and each quietly scans your features, hungry for signs of imminent vacancy. The topics swirl around you: taxes, alliances, rebellious vassals, border skirmishes. In other times, you might have relished these debates, weighed the risks, played your counselors against each other in the chess game of politics. Now, their words are muffled by the relentless background noise of your illness, details slipping through your grasp like water through your fingers. You nod in what you hope are the right places. Your seal is applied to documents you barely comprehend. Once, you might have caught the chancellor's careful misdirections or the archbishop's subtle ambition. Now you are too tired to see, too tired to care. They argue about your succession as if you are not present, as if your body is already a relic and your soul a matter for future hagiographies. Who will rule if you do not recover? The question, asked quietly at first, becomes more insistent as the days pass. Your son's name is spoken with hope by some and dread by others. The possibility of regency, the potential for civil war, the risk that old enemies might seize the moment. All these scenarios play out in whispers and glances. Even your most loyal advisors hedge their bets, preparing for a future in which your portrait will hang on the wall and your policies will be footnotes to history. You know this dance well. You remember watching your own father's counsel do the same, hovering over his failing body, making plans, carving the legacy before the man himself was cold. Power is never so raw as in the sick room, where ambition is measured not by swords, but by the tempo of a failing heart. You can almost admire the pragmatism if you could muster the energy for admiration. Legacy, for a king, is not something you shape at leisure. It is a rough draft, scribbled in the margins of wars and treaties, debts and births. Illness only sharpens the outline. What will they remember of you? A child crowned too young, a ruler battered by intrigue and illness, a king who fought to keep his kingdom together even as his body fell apart. You hope for something more, but hope, too, is a resource nearly spent. Your counselors make promises on your behalf: new taxes, new alliances, new decrees, each one quietly shifting the future toward his own vision. You watch, powerless to intervene. Sometimes you try to rally yourself, to insist on your own wishes, to remind them that the king is not yet a corpse. But your words are met with respectful silence, and the conversation moves on. They are already rehearsing the future, and you are little more than a ceremonial obstacle. Still, you persist, clinging to the rituals of rule, even as your authority ebbs. You sign your name, apply your seal, bless your son, bless the council, offer a prayer for the realm. These gestures matter, or so you hope. They are the thread that ties your life to the lives that will come after, the final acts of a king who refuses, even now, to disappear without a trace. In the evenings, when the council disperses and the sick room is quiet again, you let yourself wonder if any of it was worth the struggle. What is a legacy, if not a story shaped by others, retold by men who will never know the taste of your fear or the weight of your solitude? Perhaps, in the end, it is enough to have endured, to have held the kingdom together for one more generation. You close your eyes, listening to the council's departing footsteps, and try to believe that the story of Ferdinand IV will be something more than the sum of his illnesses. You have done what you could for as long as you could. Now you wait for history to do the rest. Outside your shuttered windows, the world of your kingdom spins on, heedless of the slow decay taking place within the castle walls. You may be surrounded by counselors and priests, but it is the distant voices of your people, those unseen crowds in muddy towns and stone cold villages, that haunt you most these days. Their rumors and stories about your health seep through the castle like a damp chill, arriving at your bedside in the mouths of servants and the nervous glances of your guards. A king's body, you have learned, is never just his own. It is public property, a canvas for everyone's anxieties, and the inspiration for countless tales told by firelight and in the echoing corners of smoky inns. The capital's markets hum with gossip about your illness. Some say you have been poisoned by a jealous noble, others that the old Moorish sorcerer who visited last year laid a curse upon your household. A few claim that the new physician, a foreigner with odd habits, brought the plague in a trunk. They say your skin is turning black, your hair falling out, your eyes rolling white in your head. The truth is much duller. You are pale, tired, and thin, but the truth is never as interesting as the story the people need to believe. In the countryside, the rumors multiply with every league of distance from the palace. A miller's wife swears she saw a crow land on the church roof the day you first took to your bed, and now the whole parish agrees it was a sign of royal doom. A band of pilgrims, trudging along the road to Santiago, invent new details with every telling. Today you have lost your speech. Tomorrow you will be dead before the moon rises. Old women stir their pots and nod, recalling how the last king had died with the same symptoms, and how nothing has been right since. Superstition is a currency far more stable than silver, and no royal decree can devalue it. Within the palace, rumors are more poisonous. They creep beneath doors and slip between tapestries, changing with each retelling. Some say your son is already planning his coronation. Others whisper that your enemies have bribed your cooks, that the queen is preparing to retreat to a convent, that the bishop has written your funeral sermon in advance. You hear the fragments from servants who forget how thin the walls are, or from loyal friends who feel duty bound to warn you of what is said. At times, you almost believe the rumors yourself, so persistent, so detailed, that they seem to crowd out the truth. It is not just your death that preoccupies your people, but what comes after. Every whisper about your health is a rehearsal for chaos. Will there be war between rival claimants, famine if the throne stands empty, an outbreak of heresy if God is seen to have abandoned you? The fabric of the kingdom is woven as much from stories as from law, and illness is a whole that threatens to unravel it all. The people do not need to see you to know you are fading. They can sense the uncertainty in the very air, the way the church bells ring longer, the way the city gates close a little earlier each night. Even the church is not immune. Priests in distant parishes pray loudly for your recovery, but among themselves debate whether to begin the rituals for the dying. Monks in the scriptorium update the royal chronicle with cautious language. His Majesty is unwell, but bravely enduring, while leaving blank space just in case the next entry is an obituary. In the city, a child born under the wrong sign is named for the saint most associated with death. A merchant delays a risky journey, waiting to see if the kingdom will be plunged into uncertainty. Your body, once a symbol of the realm's vigor, is now a weather vane for everyone's hopes and fears. The rumors do not always wound you. Sometimes they almost amuse. You hear that a baker's apprentice claims to have dreamed your recovery, while a beggar swears he saw your ghost walking the walls at midnight. There is, in this constant reinvention, a kind of rough affection. The people care enough to worry, to imagine, to hope, and even to dread. It is their way of being close to a king they will never meet, and perhaps, you realize, the only immortality a monarch can expect. Yet you cannot help but wonder how history will remember you. Will it be the reality of your slow decline, the tedium of pain, the endless procession of doctors and prayers? Or will it be these rumors, vivid, persistent, and impossible to silence, that shape your legacy? You are fading, but your story is already alive, changing with every tongue that tells it. In the end, you have little control over any of it. You are too sick to shape the narrative, too tired to protest, too much a legend already to correct the living. Outside, the world waits for news. A kingdom balanced on a rumor, watching the palace windows for the first sign of morning or the impossible news of a miraculous recovery. Within your walls, the whispers multiply. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you almost believe one of the stories yourself, a story in which you wake, healed, and the bells ring not for mourning, but for hope. In sickness, as in kingship, family becomes both your comfort and your curse. The blood that links you to your ancestors and successors is the same blood that now seems to betray you, thickening into the slow malaise that seeps through your limbs. Dynasty is the word your counselors whisper, the hope your people cling to, and the chain that binds your most private agonies to the fate of the realm. It is never enough to be simply Ferdinand. You are the latest vessel for an ancient line, a living bridge between the dead and the not yet born. Your mother hovers at your bedside, her face furrowed with real worry and the practiced sorrow of one who has spent a lifetime watching sons, brothers, and husbands slip away before their time. Her prayers are constant, But so too are her questions about your will, about your son, about the keeping of the royal bloodline. She tries to shield you from the intrigue beyond the door, but even she cannot ignore the anxious calculation in every footstep, every hurried whisper along the corridor. Your wife sits nearby, determined to present the picture of devoted queen and grieving spouse, but even she is not immune to dynastic arithmetic. You have seen the way her eyes linger on your son, not just with maternal pride, but with the weighing, measuring gaze of someone planning for a future that may not include you. She speaks of the strength of your line, of the duties you must pass on, of the need to ensure that the transition is as smooth as possible. The word succession is always just beneath the surface of her sentences, coiling like smoke in the silence that follows. Your son, the heir, walks the castle with nervous energy. He is too young for the weight that waits for him, and yet already the courtiers bow lower when he passes. Sometimes you catch him watching you with something that is not quite pity and not quite anticipation, as if trying to memorize the final lessons of your reign before the end. He asks for your advice on matters of state, his voice eager, his eyes uncertain. You want to tell him everything about the loneliness of command, the unreliability of friends, the strange half life of a king trapped by his own legend, but your words come out fragmented, tangled in pain and regret. You hope he understands what you cannot say. The extended family, meanwhile, circles like slow moving vultures, polite but predatory. Siblings, cousins, in laws. They arrive bearing platitudes and empty promises of support, each one calculating how your absence might change their fortunes. Some express open concern for the future, others quietly press for favor, gifts, titles, or land before the inevitable transfer of power. You listen to their entreaties with the detachment of someone already halfway departed, marveling at how death clarifies everyone's ambitions. The greater dynasty, the one that stretches back through dusty portraits and faded banners, offers only a cold kind of comfort. You think of your ancestors, the men and women whose names you learned by rote as a child. Did they also fear this ending, or did their stories grow grander with every retelling, their real deaths smoothed into legend by the same machinery that now grinds away at you? You wonder what, if anything, will endure of your own reign when the storytellers get to work. Legacy is a constant visitor now, slipping between your family's words, glinting in your son's anxious posture, haunting the silence after your wife's careful reassurances. Every family meal, every formal audience, every prayer at your bedside is colored by the knowledge that your place is nearly vacant, that the throne will soon claim a new occupant. You see the hope and the fear mingling in the eyes of those closest to you. Hope that the transition will be smooth, fear that it will not. In the quiet moments, when the court has withdrawn, when the priests are gone, when even the servants have retreated to their corners, you try to remember your family not as pawns or heirs, but as people. Your mother's trembling hand, your wife's tired sigh, your son's whispered promise to do you proud. For a moment, The trappings of dynasty fall away, and you are simply a man surrounded by those who share your blood and your burdens. But the moment always ends. Duty returns, heavy as ever, and you find yourself again at the center of a web spun long before you were born and destined to stretch long after you are gone. Your family waits. Your dynasty waits. The line must not break, not for illness, not for sorrow, not for the ordinary weakness of flesh. You muster a final smile, a final word of advice, a final effort to seem kingly. It will have to be enough. Soon, the story will not be yours to tell. They call it a feast, though it feels more like a performance, a final, elaborate display staged in the shadow of your decline. The grand hall is decked in banners that seem faded by comparison to your memory of better days. You are carried in with careful ceremony, propped on silken cushions, every movement watched with concern by servants and calculation by courtiers. The table is heavy with meats, pastries, and fruit, but for you, it is a landscape of impossibilities. Aromas that once stirred your appetite now summon only a distant nausea. You are placed at the head of the table as tradition demands, a living relic among the faces of those who will outlive you. The guests gather, family, counselors, noblemen, and churchmen, each arriving with forced cheer and veiled apprehension. They bow, toast, and make conversation in voices pitched just loud enough to mask the brittle tension that knots the air. Their laughter is too bright, their praise too pointed, each compliment tinged with anticipation of the world that will soon be reordered. Servants pour wine into your goblet, a fine vintage reserved for royal occasions, but the taste is as flat as the stones beneath your chair. You lift the cup for form's sake, pretending not to notice the way your hand trembles or the way your appetite has deserted you entirely. The courses march past in an endless parade: roasted game, fresh bread, golden cheeses, honeyed fruits, spiced stews. For the others, it is a feast. For you, an endurance trial. The food is there not to be eaten, but to be seen, a testament to abundance that can do nothing for your hollowed frame. You try to follow the conversation, but it washes over you like a tide. Stories of past campaigns, alliances struck, scandals narrowly avoided. Someone tells a joke at your expense, gently, carefully, in the spirit of camaraderie, and the table laughs, not too loudly. You smile, but the effort drains you. The noise, the lights, the scents, all conspire to make you feel less present, more ghostly, a witness at your own memorial. Now and then your eyes meet those of your son, who tries to match your regal poise while hiding his nervous glances toward the empty seat that will soon be his. A troupe of musicians plays at the far end of the hall, their melodies weaving through the chatter, too refined to lift your spirits, but too persistent to ignore. The jesters tumble and caper, their antics a pale echo of merriment, but even they seem to sense the gravity of the occasion. Between the laughter and the music, you catch the quick, hungry glances of men weighing their futures, measuring how best to position themselves for the moment when the throne is truly empty. You are expected to give a toast. The steward signals, and the hall hushes. You raise your goblet, steadying your voice as best you can. Words come slowly. You speak of duty, of sacrifice, of the burdens and blessings of kingship. You thank your family, your loyal advisors, the church, the people. You urge your son to be strong, to remember that a king's strength lies not in command, but in endurance. The speech is brief, mercifully so, for both your body and your audience, but the room listens as if it is already legend. As the banquet drags on, you grow more distant, drifting in and out of the present. You catch fragments of conversation, your name paired with legacy, succession, God's will. You wonder for a moment if anyone truly mourns your passing, or if they are simply impatient for the new day to begin. The faces blur together, noble and servant, friend and rival, all united by their role in this somber celebration. By the end, the hall is thick with the smells of food and smoke, and the nervous sweat of men who sense the world changing beneath their feet. You are carried back to your chamber, the festivities continuing in your absence, the laughter growing louder as your shadow retreats. Alone again, you hear the distant music fade into silence, replaced by the soft footsteps of those cleaning up what remains of the feast. You are left with memories of banquets past, of voices now gone, of moments when you truly felt alive at the head of the table. Now, the only thing left to savor is irony, that a king can preside over such bounty and taste nothing but the certainty of farewell. Tomorrow, the court will remember your toast, your steady hand, your last attempt at regality. They will call it a fitting send off, a tribute worthy of a king. But you know the truth. It was not a celebration, but a gentle, well rehearsed goodbye. The banquet ends, but the night offers you no escape. Your chamber is heavy with the residue of celebration, drained cups, the echo of forced laughter, the lingering scent of roast and wine that now turns your stomach. Servants tiptoe through the half light, clearing platters and stoking the fire, each one eager to finish and slip away as if your presence is catching. You are left alone, the door closing softly, and silence presses against your ears like a weight. This night feels longer than others. The air grows thick and close, as if the room itself is shrinking around you. Shadows gather in the corners, stretching and twisting with each flicker of candlelight. Your body, already worn thin by days of exhaustion, becomes a stranger, a sack of fever and pain, every nerve pulled taut. The blankets twist around your legs, damp with sweat, and your heart hammers as if it, too, is desperate to escape. You close your eyes, but rest will not come. Your mind races, darting from memory to worry to regret. Faces from the feast drift through the darkness. Your son, shoulders squared in borrowed confidence. Your wife, eyes bright with tears that never quite fell. Your mother, hands knotted in prayer. The noblemen and churchmen, their expressions shifting from concern to calculation the moment they thought you were not looking. You recall each word of your toast, replaying every stumble and slur, haunted by the knowledge that it was, in all likelihood, your last. Outside, the castle is hushed. Even the wind seems reluctant to disturb the stillness, but you hear things: a distant clang from the kitchen, the soft whimper of a dog, the creak of ancient wood. Somewhere, a bell marks the hours with merciless precision. Time moves strangely now, sometimes dragging, sometimes leaping, always reminding you that the night is not over, that you are not yet allowed to slip away. Your body rebels in fresh, inventive ways. Waves of fever roll through you, alternately chilling and burning your skin. Sweat pours from your brow, soaking the sheets, pooling in the hollows of your collarbone and the small of your back. Each breath is a small battle, your lungs tight and stubborn. You shift, seeking comfort, but pain radiates through your joints, as if your bones are being slowly twisted by unseen hands. The taste of medicine lingers on your tongue, sharp and metallic, a constant reminder of everything that has failed to heal you. Fear settles over you, heavy and suffocating, not the grand, noble fear of battle or the abstract terror of damnation, but the small, intimate kind. A fear that you will never sleep again, never wake feeling anything but this endless fatigue and ache. You fear the morning with its fresh parade of visitors and duties. You fear the night with its endless opportunities for your thoughts to turn against you. Most of all, you fear the possibility that this is simply what remains of life: pain, sweat, and an unrelenting awareness of your own decline. The priests say that suffering is redemptive, that every agony brings you closer to God. You wonder if God is listening tonight, or if he is busy with other, less tiresome kings. You try to pray, mouthing familiar words, but your mind drifts, catching on half-remembered childhood comforts, a lullaby, the cool touch of your mother's hand, the distant sounds of laughter before you ever knew what it meant to be afraid. These memories bring little solace. They float just beyond your grasp, too fragile to hold. As the hours stretch on, dreams begin to bleed into waking. You see faces in the shadows, hear voices in the flickering fire. Your thoughts chase each other in circles, memories, regrets, half-formed fears. You wonder if this night will ever end, if the dawn will ever break through the heaviness pressing against your chest. The darkness is patient. It waits with you, a silent companion. You are acutely aware of your own smallness, of how little control you have over anything, how easily your world has narrowed to this single miserable night. Power, legacy, ceremony, all the things that once defined you are reduced to a few gasping breaths, a handful of tattered memories, the slow crawl of time. You bargain with the darkness for a few moments of peace, a cool breeze, the relief of oblivion. Eventually, exhaustion wins. Not sleep, not rest, but a kind of collapse, a slipping away into half-formed dreams and twitching, feverish dozing. When you wake again, The candles have burned low, the room is staler, and the world is no gentler than before. You have survived the night, but it is a hollow victory. Fear and sweat are your only witnesses. Dawn, when it comes, brings only a dull gray light and the certainty that tonight will not be the last. When the weak morning light finally seeps into your chamber, it brings with it a renewed sense of urgency from your physicians. Perhaps it is the grayness of your complexion, or the labored sound of your breath, or perhaps simply the knowledge that time is running out. Whatever the reason, you are soon surrounded once more by men armed with vials, scrolls, and the stubborn belief that their knowledge might somehow hold back the inevitable. The night was a battlefield, but the day promises its own kind of siege. The procession of healers seems longer than ever. They file into your chamber with somber expressions, murmuring to each other in the secretive language of medicine and anxiety. Your chief physician leads, face drawn and eyes shadowed from a night spent conjuring new remedies. He bows, more out of habit than hope, and begins the morning ritual, examining your tongue, checking your pulse, listening to the wheeze in your chest. The verdict, as always, is grave but hopeful. There is always hope. There must be. Today's prescriptions are a mixture of desperation and tradition. One cup is pressed into your hands, a potion of bitter herbs and honey, thicker than glue, promising to soothe the humors and invigorate the heart. Another is a clear liquid, sharp and stinging, meant to purge your body of lingering poisons. Someone brings a hot poultice for your chest. Its heat, almost a relief against the chill that refuses to leave your bones. Leeches are produced again, their wriggling bodies the physical embodiment of hope gone wrong. You submit to their ministrations without protest. Resistance is futile now, and besides, it is a relief to surrender the pretense of control. The doctors bicker quietly over your bed, their arguments as circular as ever. One claims the fever must be drawn out by sweat. Another insists it must be cooled with compresses soaked in vinegar. A third suggests a new prayer, a fourth a new relic, anything that might tip the balance in your favor. The alchemist proposes an untested powder, recently imported at great expense from the East. Its taste like ashes and iron, you swallow it dutifully. Your only real question, whether you will have to taste it again tomorrow. Occasionally, one of your older healers leans close, speaking in the gentle tones reserved for the dying. He tells you stories of miraculous recoveries, of patients who hovered at the brink and returned, of saints who intervened at the last moment. You nod politely, too weary to believe or argue. Your own faith in miracles is thin as parchment now, worn by years of disappointment and months of pain. But it comforts them to speak, and you no longer begrudge anyone their hope. By midday, the treatments become more creative. A poultice of mustard seeds and goose fat is applied to your feet, meant to draw sickness downward and out. An aromatic smoke is burned, filling the room with a pungent fog that makes your eyes water and your head spin. The bishop arrives with a relic wrapped in silk, placing it on your chest and reciting prayers in a voice thick with exhaustion. Even the castle's herbalist, usually kept at a distance, is called in to offer a tisane of her own making. Just in case, she murmurs, eyes averted. The procession of treatments is relentless. You begin to lose track of time, of faces, of tastes and textures. The doctors grow more agitated as the day passes, their instructions sharper, their hands less steady. They watch you for signs, any sign, that something is working, that their efforts are not in vain. You give them what little you can, a smile, a nod, the occasional word. In return, they give you hope, however hollow. At moments, you catch a glimpse of the desperation beneath their professionalism. You are not just their king, but their greatest test. If they fail to save you, their reputations will bear the mark of your death. Some already seem to mourn you in the privacy of their eyes, while others cling to their instruments as if medicine itself is a shield against loss. By evening, you are spent, drained not just by illness, but by the relentless, futile march of remedies. The taste of medicine clings to your tongue. The ache of bruises lingers where leeches have bitten, and the fog of incense clouds your thoughts. Your body is tired, but your mind, for a fleeting moment, is oddly clear. You realize that, in their own way, the physicians are as much prisoners of hope as you are. They leave you at last, promising to return with new ideas, new prayers, new drafts of hope. The room quiets, and you are left alone again, your skin sticky, your head throbbing, the faintest trace of gratitude in your heart for those who have not yet given up. You understand now that even when all is lost, the ritual must continue, not for the patient, perhaps, but for the living. Each new effort is a final refusal to surrender. In the silence, you drift toward uneasy sleep, cradled by the knowledge that you are not the first king to be failed by his healers, and you will not be the last. Tomorrow, there will be more potions, more prayers, more last efforts. Until then, you wait, king, patient, and unwilling witness to the limits of hope. As the day wanes and your strength flickers, the rhythm of your chamber changes. The voices of physicians fade, replaced by the solemn tread of the chaplain. The day of remedies has given way to the evening of rituals, the business of medicine, replaced by the business of the soul. The chamber feels colder now, though the fire still burns. The dusk carries the faint scent of incense, and somewhere in the distance a bell tolls, slow and relentless. The priest bows by your bedside, his face a careful mask of empathy and routine. He has heard countless confessions, delivered last rites in chambers grander and meaner than this. But every king is his own story. He begins softly, inviting you to open your heart, to loosen your grip on the world, and prepare for what may come. You are tired, tired of the pain, the visits, the performance of suffering, but you know this part of the ritual cannot be skipped. A king's soul must be accounted for as carefully as his treasury. Confession in a sickbed is a peculiar thing. What sins can you confess that are not at already public record? You are a king. Your life has been lived in the open, scrutinized by priests, chroniclers, and enemies alike. Still, you search your memory for wrongs that matter, the boyhood lies, the rash words spoken in anger, the promises broken for convenience, the orders given in haste, sometimes in cruelty, that led to suffering in places you have never seen, the friendships lost to suspicion, the love neglected for duty, the pride that sometimes closed your heart to mercy. You speak questly, each admission met with a gentle nod from the priest, each regret heavier than the last. He prompts you for more. The responsibilities of kingship, he reminds you, are both a privilege and a burden. Sins of omission weigh as much as sins of commission. How many hungry mouths went unfed while the palace feasted? How many old injustices were allowed to linger because righting them was inconvenient? How many times did you let fear make your choices for you, hiding behind the grandeur of the crown? You confess these too, your words tumbling out in a weary cadence, half prayer, half apology. There is a part of you that hopes for comfort, for the priest to tell you that your sins are no worse than any other man's, that your burdens will be forgiven, that the gates of heaven open for kings as readily as for paupers. He offers absolution, the ancient words familiar, but still mysterious, the weight of tradition pressing down on you like a second illness. For a moment, you feel lighter, as if the air itself grows less oppressive. You remember stories from childhood, the righteous king who is welcomed to paradise, the sinner who repents in time. You cling to these images, uncertain but grateful for even the smallest hope. The priest speaks now of repentance, of the need not just to admit, but to amend. For the dying, amends are an impossible task. You offer prayers for those you have wronged, for the realm you will soon leave, for the son who must carry your crown and your debts. You pray for the wisdom to accept what cannot be changed and the strength to meet what comes next with dignity. The priest sprinkles holy water, his Latin a low drone that mingles with the twilight, blessing your room, your body, and whatever may remain of your soul. As darkness falls, your family is summoned. They gather quietly at your side, the air heavy with unspoken fear and forced composure. You try to offer them reassurance, a few faltering words, a trembling hand, a glance that is meant to carry the full weight of your forgiveness and your love. They listen, some with tears, some with the determined stoicism of those who know that mourning must be postponed until it is safe. You want to tell them that you forgive their ambitions, their fears, their impatience for your passing. You hope they can forgive you for the burdens you leave behind. In this hour, the castle is silent, except for the soft shuffle of slippers, the murmur of prayers, and your own uneven breathing. You are no longer the center of the kingdom, but the center of a circle that grows smaller with every hour. Your confession has not healed your body, but it has eased a part of your mind. You are not sure if you are ready for death, but you are ready, at least, to stop pretending you are untouched by it. Night deepens, and the priest withdraws, leaving behind a small silver cross and the faint scent of myrrh. You close your eyes, the weight of the day slipping from your shoulders. There is nothing left to do now but wait for peace, for pain, for the unknown. You whisper one last prayer, simple, quiet, unfinished, and hope that, wherever it goes, it finds you forgiven. The air in your chamber is different now, thicker, almost sacred, heavy with all that has been said and all that remains unsaid. You sense it in the way your family stands clustered by the fire, their voices lowered to gentle murmurs, their movements cautious, as if afraid that anything too loud or sudden might shatter the fragile boundary between your world and the next. The palace itself feels as if it is holding its breath. You are no longer just the king, but the center of a slow, careful orbit, with every eye and every heart pulled toward the gravity of your final hours. One by one, your loved ones come forward. Your mother is first, her back bent by time and worry, her hands trembling as she reaches for yours. She leans in close, her voice barely more than a whisper, reciting the same lullabies she once sang to you in your cradle. You catch the scent of lavender in her hair, and for a moment you are a child again, safe and unburdened by crowns and oaths. She blesses you in the old way, fingers tracing a shaky cross on your forehead, her tears sliding silently down her cheeks. You try to thank her, to say all that gratitude you have never quite found the words for, but your voice is weak, your tongue clumsy with emotion. She seems to understand. Her eyes meet yours, filled with forgiveness for both of you. Your wife approaches next, her posture regal, but her eyes rimmed red. She kneels by your bedside, taking your hand and pressing it to her cheek. For a moment, there are no titles, no expectations, just the warmth of shared years, fears, joys, disappointments woven together into something more real than the roles you have played. She murmurs promises to care for your son, to keep the realm together, to remember you kindly in her prayers. You try to comfort her, but words are thin and insubstantial, so you simply hold her hand, tracing the familiar bones, and hope. She knows that love can be spoken in silence. Your son stands before you, torn between childhood and rule. He tries to hide his fear, his sorrow, but you see it in the way his jaw clenches, the way his eyes flicker between hope and dread. He kneels, as tradition demands, but you gesture weakly for him to rise. You want to give him advice, wise, kingly words to last a lifetime, but the lessons that matter cannot be taught in a single night. Instead, you tell him to listen to his heart, to trust those who have earned it, and to forgive himself for his failures. A king's strength is in what he endures, you say, voice cracked and faint, not what he commands. He nods, swallowing hard, and presses his forehead to your hand. You feel the heat of his tears and hope they will be the last he sheds for you. Other relatives come and go, each seeking a final word, a blessing, a reassurance that their place in your memory will not be lost. Siblings, cousins, even old friends now reduced to cautious visitors. They each find their moment, whispering promises to keep your legacy alive, to care for your family, to serve the realm. Some speak with true affection, others with careful politeness, rehearsed and dignified, as befits the closing act of a royal life. The hardest farewells are those you cannot speak. There are old grievances left unresolved, old friendships left unsaid, old loves remembered in secret. You wish for more time, not to rule, not to command, but simply to make amends, to say the words that have always caught in your throat. There is no time. You are spent, your body a ruin, your voice a mere thread. Still, you muster what strength you have for one last gesture, a look, a squeeze of the hand, a sigh that tries to mean forgiveness, hope, love, and apology all at once. The room grows quieter as night deepens. The priest returns, offering gentle prayers for the dying, but now the words are less about sin and salvation and more about comfort, release, peace. You feel the hands of your loved ones, warm, trembling, uncertain, touching your forehead, your shoulder, your fingers. Each touch is a promise that you are not alone, that your passing will be mourned and remembered, that something of you will linger in those who loved you. You let your eyes close, listening to the soft, broken voices that hover around you like the wings of night birds. Their farewells are a balm, easing the sharp edges of regret and fear. You drift between worlds, each breath a little further from the pain, a little closer to rest. There is sorrow, but there is also relief, an end to struggle, an end to the impossible weight of kingship. The final words are simple, almost childlike. Thank you, forgive me, I love you, remember me. And then, at last, silence. Night falls heavily, pressing down on your chest like the hand of some ancient, implacable god. The warmth of your family's farewells has faded, leaving the room cooler, emptier, filled with the soft ticking of time and the quiet vigilance of those who wait for the inevitable. The candles gutter and flicker, throwing monstrous shadows across the stone walls. Outside, the world continues. Guards mutter on the battlements. A dog barks in the far courtyard, and somewhere a clock chimes the hour. But here, in your narrow bed, time is marked only by each shallow, desperate breath. Your body has become a country you no longer recognize. It will not obey, will not rest, will not allow you even the dignity of silence. Every inhalation is a labor. Air squeezes through your throat in ragged, rattling bursts. Your ribs ache as if squeezed by invisible bands, your mouth dry and sticky. The physician's face appears above you now and then, blurred and drawn, checking your pulse, whispering to the priest in the corner. You recognize their voices, but not their words. The language of the dying is a private one, a vocabulary of gasps and sighs, of small, involuntary whimpers in the dark. Sweat beads on your forehead, soaking the sheets. Fever comes and goes, breaking like a wave and leaving you cold and shivering. Sometimes you drift, half dreaming, half listening to distant memories that play behind your eyelids. You see yourself as a child running through sunlit halls, or as a young king riding out in armor, laughing with companions who are long since dust. The line between memory and the present blurs. The future shrinks to a pinpoint at the end of the bed. Every so often, a surge of panic sweeps through you, a sharp awareness that the air is thinner, that your lungs are weaker, that something inside you is letting go. Your mind flails for anchors, a word, a prayer, a familiar face. The priest's voice hums softly in the background, a low chant meant to shepherd you toward peace. You wish it would work. Instead, you find yourself fighting for each breath, clinging to consciousness, bargaining with your body for just a little more time. You are not ready, not quite, but your body cares nothing for readiness. Hours pass, or perhaps minutes, or perhaps years. Time is meaningless now. Your only focus is on breathing, first in, then out, again and again, as if by sheer will you might stave off the inevitable a while longer. Your hands grip the sheets, the cool linen, your only tether to the world. Faces appear and vanish, your son, eyes red, your wife, murmuring comfort, the priest, fingers tracing the sign of the cross on your brow. Sometimes you think you are alone, sometimes surrounded by a crowd of ghosts. At intervals, you feel as if you are floating, lifted from your pain for a heartbeat or two. In these moments, the struggle eases and you glimpse a strange, empty peace. But always you are pulled back, gasping, to the relentless present. The pain is sharpest in your chest, a pressure, a burning, a heaviness that leaves no room for anything else. Your mouth shapes silent words: mercy, mother, God, enough. The words dissolve before they reach your lips. The room grows quieter, the world smaller. The priest's chanting slows. The physician stops checking your pulse so often, and the servants have retreated, knowing there is nothing left to do but wait. The last candle sputters, casting one final, wavering shadow. You close your eyes, feeling yourself slip further away from sound, from sight, from thought. There is no drama, no thunder, only a deep, irresistible fatigue. Breathing becomes a memory, each breath softer, farther apart, until at last, even the fight is gone. In the final darkness, there is no pain, no fear, no regret, only the faintest sense of falling, the briefest whisper of peace, the soft echo of all you have loved and lost. At last, you surrender. The long battle is over. Morning is left for others. Your final breath passes so quietly that at first no one notices. The priest's voice falters, the last candle gutters out, and the shadows in your chamber deepen until all is indistinguishable: the bed, the walls, your still frame beneath the covers. For a few suspended heartbeats, the world outside the room holds its breath. No one shouts, no one weeps. Death, when it arrives, is rarely as dramatic as people wish. It slips in on cat's feet and leaves behind a silence that swallows everything. The priest is the first to move, crossing himself and murmuring the final rites. The physician lingers, hand resting a little longer on your wrist, as if he could will your pulse to return. But your body, at last, is free from duty, from pain, from the weight of royal expectation. The tension that held you together for so many days unwinds. Your hands, once clenched on the sheets, relax. The lines of your face soften into something almost peaceful. Someone leaves the room to summon the others. In the corridor, servants stand with lowered eyes, waiting for news that is already written on every face. Soon the court will be told. The rituals will begin. Clothes changed for mourning, banners lowered, bells rung in measured, somber peals that drift out over the city. For a moment, however, the world outside remains unaware, life continuing with its daily noise, merchants haggling, horses clattering, children chasing stray dogs through the muddy streets. The sun climbs a little higher in the sky, indifferent as ever to the matters of kings and mortals alike. Inside, silence thickens. Your body is the centerpiece of a new ritual now, no longer the site of hopeful intervention, but of careful procedure. The chamber is cleared of personal items. Servants lay out new linens, their movements practiced and precise, respectful but distant. There is a strange intimacy to their work, a tenderness that they could not show you while you were alive, now permitted only by your utter stillness. The priest recites prayers in a low monotone, Latin words rising and falling with the light, as if the language itself might guide your soul safely from these stone walls. Eventually, the news must spread. Courtiers gather in small, anxious knots, their voices low. Some weep, some merely sigh and begin tallying their next moves. The chancellor sends urgent messages to distant lords. The master of ceremonies prepares the hall for your vigil. The kitchen staff whispers about what comes next. Outside, a bell tolls, first slow, then steady, the sound rippling across the city and into the countryside, where farmers pause and cross themselves, not out of grief, but because this is what one does when a king dies. Within the palace, the bureaucracy of death takes hold. Lists are made, witnesses summoned, seals affixed. There is paperwork even now. Someone is dispatched to wake the herald, to draft the formal announcement. The chronicler sits in his small, cold room, dipping his pen in ink and carefully writing the words. On this day, King Ferdinand IV departed from this life after a brief and sudden fever. The phrase is neat, generic, erasing the months of slow suffering, the rituals, the hope, the pain. History does not care for such details. You are not there to see it. The silence in your chamber is profound, absolute. For the first time in weeks, there are no whispers, no prayers, no urgent instructions. Only the muted shuffle of feet, the hush of respectful voices, the echo of your absence. The world, for a brief time, rearranges itself around the shape you have left behind. Outside, life resumes its stubborn course. The rumors that dogged your illness now shift. Already, some claim your death was a mercy, others call it a disaster. The city's children are called home early. Traders hedge their bets. The churches fill with people unsure what they should feel. Your family gathers, shrouded in black, their grief performed as much for the world as for themselves. A new king will be crowned. Old alliances will be tested. The memory of your final days will fade, replaced by legend, by rumor, by the needs of a world that cannot afford to pause. And in the center of it all, your chamber stands quiet, your bed stripped, your name echoing in the silence. There is no triumph in death, nor any particular wisdom, only this hush, a stillness so complete that for a moment it feels like the world itself might never move again. But soon it does. You are gone, but your absence lingers, echoing through the halls of the palace, the chambers of memory, and the fragile lines of history. The world does not stop for any king, not even for one who has been at its center for so long. Yet for a few days, perhaps a week, your death becomes the air everyone breathes. It is there, in the thick hush of morning prayers, in the black crape wound around pillars, in the slow procession of mourners and bureaucrats shuffling through rooms that still hold your scent and the shape of your decline. Your body is dressed for burial, ringed in candles and holy water, guarded by priests and soldiers who stand at attention more out of duty than devotion. Nobles file past, offering practiced grief, heads bowed and lips moving in rehearsed prayers. Some weep, more glance sideways, already calculating their place in the new order. Old allies and former rivals trade brief, nervous words, no longer about your health, but about the next chapter. Who will rise? Who will fall? Whose alliances will be worth keeping in a world where you are only a memory? The city marks your passing with a peculiar mix of solemnity and relief. The bells toll, markets quiet for an hour or two. Sermons grow more fervent as priests remind their flocks of the fleeting nature of life, the certainty of death, and the hope of resurrection. Behind closed doors, merchants review their ledgers, soldiers polish their armor, and parents warn their children not to speak ill of the dead, at least for now. Life, as ever, is eager to close the wound, to patch the hole left by a king's slow, public vanishing. The chroniclers, those tireless recorders of royal trivia, set down the official version. Ferdinand IV, stricken by a sudden and mysterious fever, passed from this world in the grace of God. The weeks, the months of pain, the endless debates over leeches and relics, the humiliation of failing limbs and soiled sheets, these details are quietly omitted. The story is trimmed, polished, rendered safe for legend. You become another name in a litany of sovereigns, a lesson to be cited, a caution or a comfort, depending on who is speaking and why. But the truth, as always, is harder to silence. In villages and towns, old women tell stories of your suffering, the endless prayers that rose for you, the omens and dreams that were said to foretell your end. Some claim you were poisoned, some say it was the curse of a witch, others insist it was simply the common fate of kings, struck down by the invisible enemies that stalk every hearth and alleyway. Your death becomes a fable for the anxious and the ambitious, a mirror in which each person sees the reflection they need. Your family mourns, though even their grief is tangled with duty. Your son is crowned in a ceremony that feels both too soon and much too late. He wears your crown with uneasy pride, repeating the words you once spoke to him, though he cannot help but notice how heavy it feels. Your wife moves through the palace in black, her face drawn, her eyes sharp and dry. Already, she is learning the new arithmetic of power. Your mother whispers prayers for your soul in the chapel, remembering, perhaps, the child you were before the crown, before the court, before illness remade you into something less and more than a man. The physicians debate your illness for years, each clinging to a different theory. Some say your liver failed, others that your humors were irreparably unbalanced. A few suggest you died of heartbreak. None of them are satisfied, but the debate is soothing, a way to hold on to relevance now that you are beyond their reach. Your name is attached to treatises, sermons, political arguments. You are invoked as a warning against pride, against excess, against the arrogance of thinking that power can ward off the simplest, cruelest fate of all. For a while, your chamber is left untouched, as if your ghost might return to settle some last score. Servants step quietly inside, tidying what is left, sometimes pausing to whisper a hurried prayer. Eventually, the room is given to someone else, the linens changed, your scent erased, the memory of your last nights replaced by new footsteps, new ambitions, new aches. The world, always hungry for movement, presses forward. And yet, your illness lingers, not in your body, which is gone, but in the memory of your struggle, in the small changes it wrought. The laws signed in your trembling hand remain. The alliances made in desperation hold, at least for a time. Some who watched you decline now look at their own hands and wonder how soon it will be their turn. The whispers about your suffering persist, growing softer, sadder, until one day they are stories for children, and then, finally, only a footnote. In the end, your death is not a lesson, not a triumph, not even a tragedy. It is simply a fact, a quiet, ordinary conclusion to an extraordinary burden. You are remembered not for your victories or your failings, but for your humanity, for the way illness made a king just another mortal, waiting for the darkness, hoping for the dawn. And as the years turn, as names change, as stories are retold, and kingdoms rise and fall, your echo becomes just one more thread in the vast, unfinished tapestry of history, faded, frayed, and, in its own way, at last, at peace.